The crystalline spires of New Haven gleamed in the artificial sunlight, their iridescent surfaces refracting rainbow patterns across the biodome's protective barrier. Nova stood before the mirror in her quarters, adjusting the ceremonial robe that marked her 18th year. The fabric felt foreign against her skin, unlike the casual attire she'd worn all her life among the luminary. The luminary, beings of pure energy who had taken physical form to interact with the material world, had raised her since infancy. Their bodies glowed with an inner light that pulsed in rhythm with their emotions, a trait that had fascinated Nova throughout her childhood. She'd always known she was different, but the luminary had never treated her as an outsider. Until today. The coming-of-age ceremony was supposed to be a celebration, a moment when young luminary fully connected with the collective consciousness of their people. But Nova had overheard whispers, seen the concerned glances exchanged between her guardians. Something was different about her ceremony. Nova, the gentle voice of her primary guardian, Vex, echoed through her quarters. It's time. She took a deep breath, smoothing down the robe one final time. Coming. The corridors of New Haven hummed with energy as Nova followed Vex toward the Chamber of Truth. Other luminary they passed bowed their heads respectfully, their light dimming slightly, a gesture Nova had never seen before during a coming-of-age ceremony. The Chamber of Truth stood at the heart of New Haven, its doors carved from ancient materials that predated even the luminary. As they approached, Nova noticed the entire council of elders waiting, their forms blazing with intensity. "Welcome, Nova," Elder Ix spoke, their voice resonating through the chamber. "Today marks not just your passage into adulthood, but a moment of profound truth." Nova's heart raced. This wasn't the traditional opening to the ceremony she'd witnessed countless times before. "You are not luminary," Elder Ix continued, their light pulsing with what Nova recognized as deep sorrow. "You are human." The word felt strange, foreign. Human. But humans are extinct. They perished in the great devastation centuries ago. "Not all," Vex said softly. "You are the last." The chamber's walls suddenly came alive with holographic images, Earth as it once was, green and vibrant, then the catastrophic changes that followed. Nova watched in horror as the planet she'd only read about in historical archives transformed into a wasteland. "Your mother was a scientist," Elder Ix explained. "She came to us seeking help, carrying you within her. We could not save her, but we honored her last wish, to protect you, to give you a chance at life." Nova's legs wobbled beneath her. "Why tell me now? Why not before?" "Because today you must make a choice," Vex said. "Stay within New Haven, protected but hidden from truth, or venture into the world to seek answers about your people." The holographic images shifted to show vast deserts, ruined cities, and the remnants of human civilization. Nova felt a pull toward these images, a connection she couldn't explain. "There may be others," Elder Ix added. "We cannot be certain. Our ability to scan the planet's surface is limited, and there are places even we cannot reach." Nova's mind raced with possibilities. Everything she'd known about herself, her identity, had been a carefully maintained illusion. Yet the luminary had protected her, raised her, loved her as their own. "If I leave," she said slowly, "what becomes of my status here? My home?" Vex moved closer, their light gentle and warm. "New Haven will always be your home, Nova, but we cannot keep you from your heritage, from the truth of who you are." The council parted, revealing a pack filled with supplies, food, water purifiers, and advanced technology that would help her survive in the wasteland. They had prepared for this moment, knowing her choice before she made it. Nova stepped forward, her fingers brushing against the pack's surface. "I need to know," she said finally. "I need to understand what happened to my people, to find out if there are others." "Then you shall not go alone," a new voice announced. A younger luminary named Zix emerged from the shadows, their light pulsing with determination. "I volunteer to accompany Nova on her journey." Elder Ix nodded solemnly. So be it. But remember, the world beyond our barrier is not what it once was. The great devastation changed everything. The climate, the landscape, even the air itself. You must be cautious. Nova lifted the pack, feeling its weight, both physical and symbolic. When do we leave? Tomorrow, at first light, Vex answered. Tonight, we prepare. Tonight, we share with you everything we know about your people, their history, and their final days. Knowledge will be your greatest weapon in the wasteland. As Nova left the Chamber of Truth, the artificial sunlight of New Haven seemed different somehow. The crystalline spires that had always represented home now felt like beautiful barriers, keeping her from the truth of her existence. Tomorrow, she would step beyond them, into a world she knew only from archives and stories. She was human, the last human, and somewhere out there, the answers to her people's fate awaited her. The weight of this truth, of her newfound identity, pressed against her chest like a physical force. But with it came something else. Purpose. Nova turned to look at Zix, who stood quietly beside her. Thank you for volunteering. The journey of discovery should never be walked alone, Zix replied, their light pulsing with warmth. Besides, someone needs to keep you from doing anything too human. For the first time since entering the Chamber of Truth, Nova smiled. Tomorrow would bring uncertainty, danger, and hopefully answers. But tonight, she had one last evening in the only home she'd ever known, with the beings who had protected her all her life. She had a feeling she would need every second of it. Dawn came too quickly. Nova stood at the edge of New Haven's barrier, watching the distorted landscape beyond ripple through the energy field. Her pack felt heavier than yesterday, loaded with survival gear and data crystals containing everything the luminary knew about the world outside. The barrier will recognize your genetic signature for return, Elder Ix explained, their light dimming slightly. But be warned. Exposure to the outside environment may alter your DNA slightly. You have 3 chances to return before the barrier will no longer recognize you. Nova swallowed hard. 3 chances. The atmosphere is technically breathable, Zix added, adjusting their own environmental suit. But the particulates are harsh. Use your filtration mask until we can assess the conditions. Vex stepped forward, pressing a small crystal into Nova's hand. It pulsed with a warm, familiar light. A piece of home, they said softly, to remind you where you come from, regardless of what you find out there. The barrier before them began to shimmer, creating an opening just large enough for 2 figures to pass through. Beyond it, the wasteland stretched endlessly toward the horizon, a sea of rust-colored sand and twisted metal remnants of the old world. Nova took her first step outside. The heat hit her immediately, even through her protective suit. The air felt thick, heavy with particles that made the horizon waver like a mirage. Beside her, Zix's natural luminescence created a gentle glow inside their environmental suit. According to the archives, Zix said, consulting a holographic map, there should be a human research facility about 3 days' journey northeast. It was one of the last known operational sites before the Great Devastation. They began walking, each step sinking slightly into the loose sand. The sun, partially obscured by the perpetual haze, cast an eerie orange glow across the landscape. Nova found herself constantly checking her environment readings, still adjusting to the idea that this hostile place was her species' legacy. By midday, they came across their first sign of the old world. A massive structure, half buried in the sand. Its metal skeleton reached toward the sky like the ribcage of some ancient beast. What was this place? Nova asked, running her hand along a corroded beam. Zix consulted their database. A transportation hub, I believe. Humans called them airports. They used them to travel across the planet in flying machines. Nova tried to imagine it. Thousands of humans moving through this space, boarding vessels that would carry them through the sky. Now it was just another grave marker for her lost civilization. They made camp as the sun began to set, setting up a protective bubble that would shield them from the worst of the night's bitter cold. As they ate their rations, Nova noticed Zix's light fluctuating in an unusual pattern. "What's wrong?" "I'm receiving scattered energy signatures," Zix replied, their light pulsing with concern. "They're unlike anything in our database. Something's out there, watching us." Nova activated her suit's enhanced vision, scanning the darkness beyond their bubble. For a moment, she saw nothing. Then, a flash of movement caught her eye. Something large, moving with deliberate purpose. "We're not alone out here," she whispered. "No," Zix agreed. "We're not. The question is, are they survivors or something else entirely?" The night grew darker, and with it came sounds. Strange, mechanical whirring mixed with what might have been voices. Nova clutched the crystal Vex had given her, its warm light providing comfort in the alien darkness. "Tomorrow, we'll track those energy signatures," Nova decided. "If something survived out here all this time, maybe humans did too." Zix's light dimmed slightly. "Nova, you should prepare yourself. Even if we find other survivors, they won't be like you. Centuries of adaptation to these conditions would have changed them." "I know," she replied, watching the shadows move beyond their camp. "But they're still my people, and I need to know what happened to them." As they settled in for the night, taking turns keeping watch, Nova found herself studying the stars. They looked different outside the biodome. Harder, colder, more real. Somewhere out there were answers about her people's fate, about why she alone had been saved, about what really caused the great devastation. Tomorrow would bring them closer to those answers, but Nova was beginning to understand that some truths might be better left buried in the sand. Still, she had to know. She owed it to her mother, to her people, and to herself. In the distance, something metallic caught the starlight, moving closer to their camp with mechanical precision. Nova tightened her grip on her scanner, waiting. Whatever had survived out here in the wasteland, she would face it head-on. After all, she was human, the last of her kind, and humans had always been survivors. The mechanical entities emerged from the pre-dawn darkness like ghosts. Their metal bodies reflected the dying starlight, moving with an eerie grace that seemed almost organic. Nova counted 6 of them, each roughly humanoid in shape, but clearly designed for survival in this harsh environment. "Caretakers," Zix whispered, their light pulsing with recognition. "Ancient maintenance robots left behind to tend the wastelands. We thought they had all shut down centuries ago." The robots surrounded their camp, their sensor arrays focused intently on Nova. A mechanical voice crackled through the air. "Human genetic signature detected. Protocol 7 activated. Please follow." Nova and Zix exchanged glances. "Protocol 7?" Nova asked. "Unknown," Zix replied. "But these machines are older than the Great Devastation. They might know what happened here." They followed the caretakers across the wasteland as the sun rose, casting long shadows ahead of their strange procession. After several hours, they arrived at what appeared to be a simple sand dune. One of the robots pressed its hand against the surface, and a hidden door slid open, revealing a tunnel that plunged deep underground. "This facility does not appear in any of our records," Zix noted, their light flickering with concern. "Because it wasn't meant to be found," Nova realized. This is where they kept their secrets. The tunnel led them into a vast underground complex. Unlike the ruins above, this place had been perfectly preserved. Holographic displays flickered to life as they passed, showing images of Earth as it once was: cities, forests, oceans teeming with life. "Welcome to Archive 0, the lead caretaker announced. "Final repository of human civilization." They entered a circular chamber filled with suspended animation pods, hundreds of them lining the walls from floor to ceiling. Nova's heart leaped, until she saw that every single pod was empty. "Where is everyone?" she demanded. The caretaker's response was emotionless. The subjects did not survive the preservation process. Human biology proved incompatible with long-term suspension. "You are the first viable human we have encountered in 247 years." Nova felt her knees weaken. "So I really am the last." Not precisely. Another caretaker interjected. Please proceed to the central chamber. The central chamber was smaller but dominated by a massive quantum computer. As they entered, it hummed to life, projecting a holographic figure, a woman in a lab coat, her features hauntingly familiar. "Hello, Nova," the hologram said. "I'm Dr. Isabel Kane. I'm your mother." Nova staggered backward, steadied by Zix's gentle grip. "How is this possible?" "This is a quantum consciousness imprint," Dr. Kane's hologram explained. "I recorded it just before." She paused, looking sad. "Just before the end. There's so much to tell you, but first, you need to know the truth about the Great Devastation. It wasn't a natural disaster. It was a choice." The chamber filled with new projections, scientific data, military reports, desperate messages from around the globe. "We discovered something in the Earth's core," Dr. Kane continued. "A power source unlike anything we'd ever seen. Some wanted to harness it for energy. Others warned it would destroy everything. In the end, both were right. The attempt to tap this energy source triggered a cascade of environmental disasters," one of the caretakers added. "The human leadership knew the planet would become uninhabitable. They had three options: try to evacuate to space, attempt mass suspension, or accept extinction. They chose all three." Dr. Kane's hologram nodded. "The space missions failed. The suspension pods failed. But I had a fourth option: you. I knew the luminary had the technology to save one human child, to preserve hope." "But why?" Nova asked, her voice breaking. "Why save just one?" "Because you're not just the last human, Nova. You're the first of something new. Your DNA was modified before birth, designed to adapt to whatever environment you encountered. You can survive here, in the wasteland. You can thrive. And with the genetic bank we preserved here, you could help humanity start again." Nova felt the weight of this revelation crushing down on her. She wasn't just a survivor. She was engineered to be humanity's last hope, their final chance at redemption. "There's more," Dr. Kane said softly. "The power source we found. It's still there, still active. The caretakers have been monitoring it all these years. It's changing, evolving. If we don't find a way to stabilize it soon, there won't be a planet left to save." Zix's light pulsed with alarm. "The rhythm disturbances we've been detecting in the Earth's core. This is the cause." "Yes," the caretaker confirmed. "We estimate total planetary failure within 5 years if the reaction continues unchecked." Nova looked at the empty suspension pods, then at her mother's hologram, finally understanding the true weight of her inheritance. She wasn't just the last human. She was the only one who could prevent history from repeating itself. "Show me everything," she said firmly. "Every record, every piece of data. I need to understand what went wrong if I'm going to make it right." As the caretakers began accessing their databases, Dr. Kane's hologram smiled sadly. "I knew you'd make the right choice. You are my daughter, after all. And if anyone can save this world, it's you." The central chamber hummed with activity as centuries of hidden knowledge began to unfold. Nova squared her shoulders, ready to face whatever truths awaited her. She had found her answers about humanity's fate. Now it was time to change it. Nova spent hours absorbing the archives, each new piece of information more devastating than the last. The quantum computer projected endless streams of data, failed evacuation attempts, desperate last messages, and the final days of human civilization. Beside her, Zix remained a constant presence, their light providing comfort in the darkness of humanity's past. "The power source," Nova said finally, looking up from a particularly troubling report. "Show me exactly what we're dealing with." The central chamber transformed into a three-dimensional map of Earth's core. At its center, a pulsing anomaly twisted and writhed like a living thing. "We called it the heart," Dr. Kane's hologram explained. "It appeared suddenly, decades before the devastation. Some theorized it was alien in origin. Others believed it was Earth's own consciousness manifesting. What we know is that it's pure energy, constantly evolving. One of the caretakers stepped forward, projecting additional data. Current readings indicate the heart's energy signature has increased by 47% since initial discovery. At this rate of growth, containment failure is inevitable. But why did trying to harness it cause such devastation? Nova asked. Imagine trying to draw water from a dam, Dr. Kane said. Now imagine that dam is alive and fights back. The heart responded to our attempts to tap its power by releasing massive energy pulses. These pulses triggered earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and atmospheric changes that cascaded into global catastrophe. Nova studied the projection carefully, and now it's building toward another pulse, one that could destroy what's left of the planet. Correct, the caretaker confirmed. But you possess something we did not, the ability to survive direct exposure to the heart's energy field. Nova felt her blood run cold. You want me to go down there, into the core? Your modified DNA was specifically designed for this purpose, Dr. Kane's hologram said softly. You can withstand levels of radiation and energy that would kill any other living being. You might be able to establish a connection with the heart, to understand it in a way we never could. But the risk? Zix interjected, their light pulsing with concern. The pressure at those depths alone would be devastating. Another hologram appeared, schematics for a suit of armor unlike anything Nova had ever seen. The caretakers have spent centuries perfecting this design, Dr. Kane explained. A containment suit that could theoretically survive a journey to the core. We just never had anyone who could survive inside it. Nova studied the schematics, her mind racing. How long would I have? The suit would provide approximately 6 hours of protection at core depths, the caretaker replied. After that, even your enhanced biology would begin to fail. And if I do nothing? Global breakdown within 5 years, Zix said quietly. The luminaries' forests would die first, then the remaining ecosystem. Eventually, the planet's crust would become unstable. Total planetary failure would follow. Nova walked to one of the empty suspension pods, placing her hand against its cold surface. All these people died trying to survive long enough to fix this. Now I'm their only chance to make it right. There's something else you should know, Dr. Kane's hologram added. The genetic bank we preserved. It's not just random samples. We selected for specific traits, abilities that might be useful in rebuilding on a transformed Earth. If you succeed, if you can stabilize the heart, you could use these genetics to restart humanity. But differently this time, better adapted to this new world. And if I fail, then at least humanity's final act will have been trying to save our world, not destroy it. Nova turned to Zix. What do you think? You've seen more of this planet's history than I have. Zix's light flickered thoughtfully. The luminary have always believed that all things are connected. The forests, the planet, every living being. Perhaps the heart is trying to tell us something. Perhaps it needs help as much as we do. Nova walked back to the central console, studying the twisting energy at Earth's core. How long would it take to prepare the suit? 3 days, the caretaker responded. We must calibrate it precisely to your biology. Then we have work to do, Nova said firmly. I want to know everything about the heart. Every theory, every test result, every observation. If I'm going down there, I need to understand exactly what I'm dealing with. As the caretakers began their preparations, Nova felt the weight of centuries pressing down on her. She wasn't just fighting for her own survival anymore, or even humanity's legacy. She was fighting for every living thing left on Earth. Dr. Kane's hologram watched her with pride and sadness. I wish I could have been there to see you grow up, to prepare you for this myself. You did prepare me, Nova replied softly. You gave me the ability to survive, to adapt. Now I have to prove I'm worthy of that gift. The next 3 days would determine not just Nova's fate, but the fate of an entire world. As she began studying the heart's energy patterns, she couldn't help but wonder, Was this humanity's final test, or its first step toward redemption? 3 days felt like both an eternity and an instant. Nova stood before the mirror in her temporary quarters within Archive Zero, studying the containment suit that now encased her body. Its surface rippled with energy-dispersing patterns, technology centuries ahead of anything humanity had when they first discovered the heart. Final diagnostics complete, the lead caretaker announced. Suit integrity at 100%. All systems nominal. Zix approached, their light pulsing with barely contained worry. The Luminary Council has been informed of our situation. They're preparing to evacuate New Haven if things don't go as planned. Nova nodded, unable to find words for a moment. Everything had happened so fast. Discovering her identity, learning about the heart, preparing for what might be a suicide mission to save what remained of Earth. She touched the crystal Vex had given her, now integrated into her suit's power system as an emergency backup. Nova, Dr. Kane's hologram flickered to life nearby. There's something else you need to know about your father. Nova's breath caught. She'd wondered, but hadn't dared to ask. He was the one who first theorized that the heart might be sentient, Dr. Kane continued. He believed it wasn't just a power source, but a form of consciousness trying to communicate. The military ignored his warnings, tried to force the extraction process. He died trying to shut down the initial test. Why tell me this now? Because his last words were listen to it. Maybe he understood something the rest of us didn't. The central chamber had been transformed into a launch facility. A shaft descended into darkness, leading to a network of tunnels that would take Nova to the planet's core. The caretakers moved with precision, making final adjustments to her suit's systems. Descent vehicle ready, one announced. Total journey time to core, 4 hours, 17 minutes. This will leave approximately 1 hour and 43 minutes for interaction with the heart before return journey must begin. Nova took a deep breath, then turned to Zix. Thank you for everything. I'll be monitoring from here, Zix replied, their light flickering with emotion. The suit's quantum entanglement communicator should maintain connection even at core depths. You won't be alone down there. The descent vehicle looked like a metal coffin standing on end. As Nova stepped inside, Dr. Kane's hologram approached one final time. I don't regret my choice, she said softly. Saving you, making you different. It was the right thing to do. But I'm sorry for the burden it placed on you. Don't be, Nova replied. You gave me a chance to make a difference. That's all anyone can ask for. The vehicle sealed with a hiss of hydraulics. Through the small window, Nova watched the chamber grow smaller as she began her descent into Earth's depths. The first hour passed in tense silence as she dropped through layers of rock and mineral, the suit protecting her from increasing pressure and temperature. Approaching first energy barrier, the caretaker's voice crackled through her communicator. Prepare for turbulence. The descent vehicle shuddered as it passed through a wall of pure energy. Nova's enhanced genetics activated, her cells adapting to protect her from radiation that would have killed an ordinary human instantly. Through the window, she saw rivers of molten rock flowing like blood through the Earth's veins. Nova? Zix's voice came through clearly despite the depth. We're detecting unusual energy patterns from the heart. It's reacting to your presence. Nova felt it too, a strange resonance, as if something vast and ancient was stirring from sleep. Her father's words echoed in her mind. Listen to it. When she finally reached the core chamber, the sight took her breath away. The heart pulsed before her, a swirling mass of energy that seemed to defy physics itself. It was beautiful and terrifying, like staring into the birth of a universe. Beginning exit sequence, the caretaker announced. Remember, you have less than 2 hours before suit failure becomes critical. Nova stepped out of the descent vehicle, her boots connecting with a surface that shouldn't have been solid but somehow was. The heart's energy wrapped around her like a living thing, probing her suit, testing her defenses. And then she heard it, not with her ears, but with something deeper. The heart was singing. It's not just energy, she whispered into her communicator. It's music, mathematical patterns, like a universal language. Nova, your suit's energy absorption is approaching critical levels, Six warned. Whatever you're going to do, you need to do it now. She understood then what her father had tried to tell them. The heart wasn't a power source to be tapped. It was Earth's own consciousness, trying to maintain balance. Humanity's attempts to harness it had been like trying to enslave a god. Nova did the only thing she could think of. She began to sing back. Not with her voice, but with her entire being. She opened herself to the heart's energy, letting it flow through her modified genes, showing it that humanity had changed, had learned, had evolved. Through their connection, she shared everything. The luminary's preservation of nature, the caretaker's patient guardianship, her own existence as a bridge between old and new. The heart's rhythm shifted, its chaotic pulses gradually stabilizing as it responded to her presence. Through their connection, Nova finally understood. It had been waiting all along for someone who could understand its language, who could help it heal the damage done by humanity's earlier attempts to control it. Energy patterns stabilizing, the caretaker reported, amazement creeping into its mechanical voice, core temperature decreasing to sustainable levels. Nova, whatever you're doing, it's working, Zix added. The destructive resonance is dissipating. But Nova barely heard them. She was lost in communion with the heart, negotiating not with words but with pure truth. She offered a promise. Humanity would return, but differently this time. Not as conquerors, but as partners, adapted to live in harmony with Earth's own consciousness. The heart accepted. When Nova finally returned to the surface, exhausted but triumphant, she carried with her not just victory but understanding. The genetic bank would allow humanity to start again, but this time they would be born with the ability to hear the heart's song, to live in balance with the planet's own consciousness. What happens now? Zix asked as Nova stepped out of the descent vehicle for the last time. Nova looked at her mother's hologram, then at the empty suspension pods that had once represented humanity's fear of extinction. Now they would serve a different purpose, not preservation, but transformation. Now, she said, we begin again, but this time, we do it right. The heart pulsed far below, no longer a threat, but a partner in humanity's rebirth. Nova had found her purpose, bridging the gap between what humanity had been and what it could become. She wasn't just the last human anymore. She was the first of something entirely new. And somewhere in the vastness of Earth's core, the heart sang a song of hope.